Welcome to another amazing episode of Raising Private Money. I'm Jay Conner, your host, and I'm so excited to have a good friend, fellow mastermind member, join us here on the show today. This is the show, this is the podcast where we talk about raising private money for your real estate deals without ever having to ask for money. Well, my friend and guest, he's already raised over $3 million just in this year alone for his real estate deals. He's a very, very prominent figure, very well known in the Tampa real estate investing community. And he's also the founder of several successful ventures. Well, on today's show, in this episode, we're going to dive deep and talk about all things about raising private money. For example, how do you approach private lenders to raise your first million? Secondly, what kind of strategies do you use to build the trust and the credibility that you need? Thirdly, how do you convince new private lenders to actually commit, excuse me, and do business with you? And, really is networking important? How does networking play in raising private money? And what mistakes should you avoid and watch out for when you're starting out? In just a moment, you're going to meet my good friend, fellow mastermind member and guest today, Mr. James Lascara, right after this.
If you're a real estate investor and are wondering how to raise and leverage private money to make more profit on every deal, then you're in the right place. On Raising Private Money, we'll speak with new and seasoned investors to dissect their deals and extract the best tips and strategies to help you get the money, because the money comes first. Now here's your host, Jay Conner.
Well, hello, James. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Jay, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to dig in this with you.
Man, I'm excited to dig into it with you as well. I mean, you're raising private money for your real estate deals is like on steroids. And in the little bit of time that we've been around each other in person, I know a big reason why that is, but I'll let my audience figure that out as we get into the interview here. So before we dive into your approach on raising private money and the strategies you use and how you work with your private lenders, how you instill trust, integrity, credibility, all that kind of good stuff, take a moment and share your backstory as to how you got from where you were to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Studied ocean engineering in college and graduated from the Naval Academy in 2010, went right into the Navy as an officer and spent 15 years in the Navy, got out and found real estate through the process of acquiring properties with my VA loan, slowly building up a portfolio of rentals. And then just merged into more and more projects that we realized that the right leverage, bringing financial freedom to people who didn't want to run the project and make decisions on the project could be plugged into the project in a really passive way. And so that really identifying a niche need in the marketplace and growing our business around that need has been how we've grown really pretty substantially in the last 5 years, especially here in Tampa.
It's been my observation, James, over the years that real estate investors that are capital raisers for their real estate deals, it seems as though in their story that I hear, and I've heard a lot of stories, that there's a pivotal moment or there's a pivotal experience that triggers the real estate entrepreneur to actually start raising private money. What was it in your story and journey that triggered you to start raising private money instead of just using institutional money?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Jay. And thanks for asking. I would say it came down to two things. One was realizing that I was putting an immense amount of discipline, almost obsessive focus into finding projects that would deliver, a 20% plus average annualized return. And in that regard, I'm the general partner on those deals, burning the candle at both ends to make sure the deals go right. The acquisition is bought at the right price. The value add is done in a prudent manner. And so that was the first thing. So if I'm really, really putting immense focus and energy into that, and leverage can be had at a lesser rate, right? 8%, 10%, then that can lever my average annualized return to be even higher. So that was point number one. And the second point was, had all these people, the more people that realized I was getting and really immersing myself into the real estate investing space, they were asking like, hey, how can I be plugged in? So as a way to kind of marry those two possible opportunities up with each other and bring opportunities actually to people that would genuinely benefit them, as well as offer us a pretty good option for leverage in our own projects. And I'm a big believer, really quick, like in leading with value. And that's, I think, the approach that I've always taken when it comes to raising private money.
Okay. Well, you are the founder of several successful ventures. One of the ventures that you're the founder of is the Elite Investor Mindset Group. And I know a lot of our listeners cannot see you as I can see you as we are interviewing right now, but behind you, there's a picture of this head and the brain, like a digital version of a person's brain in their head. Why do you have that up there? And to what degree do you think mindset plays into the success of your real estate ventures?
Yeah, absolutely. Mindset is everything. I think, but this is just my own opinion. I realize there may be dissenting opinions out there, but to me, the success and growth as a leader, the success and growth as a business owner and in your own business strategies cannot exist outside of having the right mindset. If you don't have the right mindset, it just won't happen. And so that, I think, is the portrait is a representation of that. That's something we came up with several years back, and that's the logo for our Elite Investor brand.
So let's dive into that for a moment. What kind of mindset is required? What attributes are required to be successful?
Yeah, so I think persistence, and more specifically, the capacity to kind of take some punches on the nose, because in entrepreneurship, you are going to have setbacks. Like, that is the one thing that is going to be guaranteed. So being able to take some on the nose and come back, re-enter the cycle with those iterated lessons learned, so you can come back into the business process stronger and implementing on those lessons learned. I think that's probably the number one thing I see separate people apart who really grow and people who stagnate.
In other words, resilience.
Absolutely.
Quitting is not an option, right? Well, it is an option. You just don't choose it as an option, right?
Correct.
Well, let's dive into the private money, James. Let's dive into private money, my favorite subject. So you answered this. You talked about value. You talked about serving, but I want you to dive into that a little deeper. What advice would you give from your own experience? How do you approach potential private lenders in raising that first $1 million?
Yeah, I already said it. I think it's leading with value. I think another part of that is the realization that not every single person is going to be a great fit for what you may have to offer. That's okay. That doesn't make them bad people. Doesn't make you a bad person. But when you're able to lead with value, tell people about these great things you're doing in the real estate investing world. People want to hear your story. People want to lean in and see how they could potentially get involved, especially in a way that helps them. So just as an example of that, something really easy that we did a few years back is we have a one-page graphic. If somebody asks about how they can potentially get plugged into what we're doing, we send them that one-page graphic, and then we schedule a call so we can discuss further. And on that graphic, we have 3 different ways they can get involved as a passive investor with us. So that's just a quick way that we lead with value. That's, it's not nuclear, it's not super complicated, but it works.
Right. Do you also lead with value? Do you also provide value to your private lenders, your investors in your deals by any kind of group settings or Zoom meetings or in person, or is it all one-on-one, or how do you go about communicating with your community of private lenders?
Yeah, so it varies based on the deal. For some of our private debt towards some of our development projects, those consist of a less frequent update. So just kind of a check-in, like, hey, here's what we have going on this quarter. Here's what you can expect next quarter, kind of thing. Those who are equity investors in our development projects, they get a monthly update until the project is completed. And once, if we're building it to sell, then we'll do a weekly update based on market trends we're seeing for the disposition. And then for some of our multifamily syndication projects, that's typically either monthly or quarterly, depending on the project.
So, two-part question. The overall enveloping question is, where do you find these people? Where do you find new private lenders, new investors in your deals? And a subset question to that is, to what degree does networking play into raising private capital?
Jay, you led me right into it. Networking is everything. If you're starting out, I'm speaking this next point specifically to people who might be new to this space. If you're starting out and you're looking to raise your first, whatever, your first 100K, 500K, million, you already know the people who are going to be the investors. You already know them. You just have to find who they are. And what I mean by that is they might be in your family. They might be friends. They might be friends of friends, but you already likely know this person's name and you've been introduced to them. You just have to have the capacity to have that conversation. And then networking has been so huge for what we're doing. I mean, as our brand has grown, we don't have to do so much outreach anymore. It kind of, people see what we're doing and they kind of come to us. And once you get to a certain level, there's an efficiency to be found there.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll have, and I know what I know what my response is. I want to hear your response. But sometimes I'll be teaching a group of new real estate investors that are, or at least new to this idea of raising private money. And invariably, sometimes there's somebody there in the audience that says, well, what do you do if you don't know anybody that's got money? How would you respond to that?
So they know people though that know money. They know people that have money. And so everybody's worthy of like respect and courtesy. It's not a function of, I'm only going to talk to people who only have money, but to be efficient, you do want to try to target that avatar for sure. Something that I've found much more success with in recent years, by the way, I think raising money got a little bit more challenging, like 2022 and till now. I think pre-2022 is a little bit easier, I noticed. But something that I do is I will always ask, who is it that you may know who's worth having a conversation with if they might be interested in something like this? And that has generated a ton of different, like kind of spider web networking effect to where we get introduced to connections of connections to do business. And that leads to another connection because I'll ask that to every single person.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. It's not who you know only. It's who you know that they also know that you could be introduced to. Now, I know one thing that you're big on is building trust and credibility. How do you go about that when you're talking with, potential private lenders? How do you instill that feeling, that trust that they believe that you will do and that you will perform as to what you say you're going to do? Because what I've observed over the years is the people really aren't investing in the deals. They're really investing in you to make it happen. So how do you instill that feeling to where they're comfortable to move forward?
Yeah, Jay, that's such a great question. I would say there's two things. One, I ask them, right? Like, what is it that you think, what do we need to discuss to help you have a really great feeling about working together? And for some people, their barrier of being able to trust you may be so high that like there's nothing that you can do to make them feel comfortable. And you kind of, as you go through the conversation, you kind of sense that out. So that's one thing, right? Ask the right questions. That should be part of your approach to speaking with any investor if you are raising money. And then the second thing is we have a track record document, right? Any investor who wants to see our track record document for our development projects, we'll send it to you, right? It lists every project we've done, how it did, when it was bought, when it was sold, what the return was on it. And I'm not shy about sharing that at all. I want people to feel great about what it is they're doing. I never want anyone to feel any kind of pressure or, outside forcefulness to get plugged in with us. This has to be a win-win. If it's not, I'm not interested.
Yeah. Now, most of or all of the capital that you're raising is for commercial, multifamily, new developments. Is that right? You're not raising money for single family, right?
Well, some of our all our developments are residential in nature. So a few of those were single unit builds. And actually today, ironically, we sold the last unit of recent townhome development project. So that project is fully concluded and stamped the books on it.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So it's kind of both.
Okay. Well, the reason I was asking is one way that we instill trust and take the pressure off when I'm raising money, particularly talking with a new potential private lender, is I don't ever have any initial conversations, and you may not as well. I don't ever have any initial conversations with a potential private lender and talk about a deal at the same time. Because if I do that, number one, desperation's got a smell to it. It's been my experience. The worst time to be trying to raise money is when you actually need it for a deal. And secondly, if I am leading with value, the way I lead with value, James, is I actually put on my teacher hat. My teacher hat says private money teacher. That's how I lead with value. Yeah, we've got 47 private lenders that are funding our deals. You know what's interesting is not one of them had ever heard of private money, the self-directed IRAs, how they could use retirement funds to invest. This is all brand new. And so I teach first my private lending program, my opportunity. What's the interest rate that I pay? How are they protected? How can they get their money back in case of an emergency? What's the length of the notes? And I don't bring a particular deal in that conversation. But once they tell me that, hey, this sounds interesting, I would like to get involved, then exactly what I tell them is I say, well, I'm going to put your money to work for you just as soon as possible. And then a week will go by or 2 weeks or whatever, and I'll call them up with what I call the good news phone call. And I give them the good news and a little overview about the deal as to how I can put their money to work. And then I tell them to wire their funds, and it's as simple as that. So that's one way that, you know, we lead with value, that we instill the integrity and the trust and et cetera, by not trying to pressure anybody. You know, I tell people all the time, I'm not trying to sell anybody, persuade, no selling, begging, chasing. It's been my experience whenever I try to chase money, it eludes me. But when I, you know, present opportunity and I got my teaching hat on, you know, it seems to come chasing after me. Would you agree with me that that's your experience?
I think there's a dynamic with it. I'm laughing because the truth of this. I've definitely chased before, right? I agree. That's sometimes a lesson that can be learned in pain, is when you are raising money and you need it the most is when it becomes the hardest. I've been in that spot before. I always put myself in a position where, you know, my business can cover it if our due diligence funds are on the line or whatever, but it's also at the same time not comfortable. But I would agree, if you approach it with abundance, it tends to find you. That's not an exception for putting the work in, of course. But yeah, when you approach it with abundance and the right positive mindset, it tends to lead to you, or for me, getting out of my own way, and the opportunities they just naturally happen.
There you go. Now, I'm curious. I haven't heard many other capital raisers talk about this, but you may have some insight. Do you use any specific software or tools or platforms to help you raise private money and manage it and keep up with it and all that?
So we use Google Sheets a lot, and that I know that's not like the best thing. We used to use a different platform. We got off of it. I'm kind of shopping for the right CRM because we have a lot of different aspects of different businesses that we do, and I want one that integrates into all. So we're probably on the cusp in the next month or so of swapping everything over. As far as tracking people's current investments, we just update it with Google Sheet, and they're all pretty long term. So like the shortest private note that we'll do is 12 months. And so, yeah, you know, we're not burning the oil to keep up with it. And I have a team that does a really good job of keeping up with all of it. So,
well, let me tell you, James, we are even more sophisticated than you as to how we keep up with our private lenders' money and how much they've got invested and secured by each property. It's an Excel spreadsheet that we update every month.
Yep.
Here's the property, here's the property, here's the private lender, the private lenders or whatever. So now, so James, I need you to trust me. I need you to hang in here with me. I'm going to put you on the spot. And I know you're going to tell the truth, because the truth that you answer is going to give a lot of value to our listeners.
No pressure.
And here's the question. What mistakes, what big piles of doo-doo did you step in when you first started raising private money? And what lessons did you learn from the mistakes that you made? that would be of value to our listeners?
I will share. Okay. I will share. I was actually the investor on this one, and I was not the one raising. And I think you can learn a lot about life and business and leadership through the lens of mistakes of others. And actually, a smart man does. So there was a private loan that I did back in 2021 that was not collateralized by any real estate, not collateralized by any property. It was for a business. And the thing that I really learned in pain was how good is a personal guarantee if all the cards in the deck kind of fall? And then also, like, how will this be paid out in terms of collateral if it comes to that? Like, how am I protected? And the answer was I wasn't. And so that was a pretty tough lesson learned, not life-changing, but, definitely skinned my knee on it. And so I've definitely implemented that in how I raise money, because I always want someone who invests with us to know that they're protected by the equity that's by either an instrument and tied exactly to the property, or the equity established in that property if it's more on the LP equity side.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'd like for you now to give some advice to individuals that are perhaps considering being a private lender, private investor, and doing business with other people. What advice would you give to them to make sure they're making the best decision, that yes, I should feel okay about making this loan on this deal, or what should I watch out for? And okay, I should not get involved in this deal. What are the red flags?
Yeah, a couple questions in there. I would say green flags, because that sounded like the first part of your question, Jay. Green flags that I would probably look for is somebody who understands the concept of asymmetric bets. So anyone can put a pro forma together that looks super, super profitable based on the best possible scenario and best upside. But that's not how real life works. So, like, what is the downside, and how are you sure that you're going to get paid in that as the investor in that deal, subject to somebody else running the deal and making those decisions? So I would say invest with somebody who does understand the concept of asymmetric bets, and ask them what assumptions they're making about, the market right now, or interest rates in the market, because that affects buyer sentiment if you're trying to sell a project, things like that. So that's one thing. And then I would ask them as well about the risk mitigation. I have a big principle in business. I call it don't stack risks. So don't layer on a bunch of things all on top of each other, all of which you may have never done before, because that gets stacked a bunch of risk up like a Jenga tower. And as we all know, it comes crashing down. So look for people who have a bit of a track record and explain to you their assumptions and risk mitigation plan. I think that would go a long way. I also don't be shy about asking about someone's track record. I think someone who gets offended about that, it makes me question if they're hiding something.
Suspect.
Yes.
Yes. Now, let's turn the coin upside down, and let's speak to our real estate investors who are looking to raise private money. Maybe they haven't before. So I'm going to share a short little story, James. This story is as recent as last week. And then after listening to the story, I want you to give the audience advice, speaking to real estate investors, on how to avoid this happening to them. I was visiting with a lady over the phone last week. She actually is a new member of my mastermind community. But prior to coming into my membership of real estate investors that are looking to raise private money, she had an experience that she shared with me that was very painful for me to listen to, because I've heard this story before, just not to the degree that she experienced it. Long story short, she wired $40,000 to a supposed private lender that was going to fund some large real estate deal that she got. Can you imagine wiring somebody $40,000, anticipating to get funding for your deal? Of course, there never was any funding. No funding ever showed up. She's out $40,000. What advice would you give to real estate investors to never go down that road?
Yeah, so we do a lot of business in Florida, and I'll give you a great example in Florida. If you're doing a deal here, like, you should be wiring into a title company here who's going to facilitate closing that transaction. Probably 98% of the time that is true. If it's not true, there should be really compelling reasons why. And so like understand based on which state you're in, North Carolina is an attorney only closing state. Florida, it's a title company or an attorney. So be familiar with kind of the way of doing business in your respective area. And if you don't know what that is, or if it's uncomfortable, it's a place you've never experienced before, like ask around. Another thing that I like to do, if I haven't been introduced to somebody, for example, like if a colleague says, hey, meet Jeff, he's a great guy, we've done a lot of business together, and I trust that colleague, there's a degree of trust that Jeff gets extended from me. But if that isn't the case, like I want to get on a phone and I want to have an actual conversation with somebody to kind of feel this out. That's not foolproof, but that's another step that I take. So be aware of industry norms and standards, and then get on the phone. If anything ever seems questionable, get a colleague's second opinion and just mention your concern to whoever the other party is. If they're actually a problem solver in the real estate investing space, which a professional is, they'll want to lean in and help you solve the problem together.
Yeah. Yes, I couldn't agree more. And in addition to that, here's the big red flag. Well, first of all, this person I was visiting with last week on the phone that experienced this pain responded to a Facebook ad. I don't know very many reputable lenders that are advertising on Facebook, to tell you the truth, right? But anyway, here's the big red flag. The big red flag is she wired money first in order to get money funded. You never, did I say never? You never send money to anybody in order to get money. The lender, even if it's a hard money lender, an institutional lender, they get paid from the closing after closing, not before closing. So
yeah,
anyway,
that's just crazy. I think the only thing I can think of is maybe like an appraisal, but appraisal, you're talking maybe $1,000, $2,000 tops, but sometimes that can also be rolled into your closing costs. So yeah, that's just wild.
Exactly. Now, James, I know that you are looking to get connected with even more real estate investors in the Tampa area. Talk about that as to who you'd like to get in front of.
Yeah. So we run a local mastermind group here, Jay. It's called the Elite Investor Mindset Group. It's primarily for people with an existing business strategy that with some success in real estate. The ideal person is already doing $100,000 plus per year, and they have a strategy that they want to see more results in and more collaboration with. It's the center of excellence for collaboration in Tampa real estate. We're about 100 members. It's smaller, it's intimate, definitely geographically focused. And so it is a really powerful group. I actually do a ton of deals myself in my own business in the group, so I enjoy it a lot.
Awesome. And what's your preferred way for people, real estate investors in the Tampa area, to reach out to you or follow up with you?
Yeah, it's for sure on Instagram. It's at JPL Invest on Instagram. We post a lot of educational and fun content there. We have a good time with it. We've got a link tree. You can see all our info, how to get plugged in with us, how to invest with us, how to learn more about our events. You can see that all on Instagram right there.
Awesome. And then in addition to that, do you by chance have any investing opportunities for private investors or private lenders that might want to get involved with you? You got anything going on right now?
We always do. Yep. We have an opportunity for a qualified opportunity zone right now that's in Central Florida, down in the town of Bradenton. And so that one's a really, really good deal, made even incredibly better by the tax preferential treatment if you have qualifying capital gains within the last 6 months. So that opportunity zone deal is a really good one. I personally have multiple six figures into it as well. So that's a great deal.
Awesome. And what's the best way for people that would like to learn more about that to get information?
Yeah, again, Instagram is great. We'll use that as a messaging center and get you all the info you need.
All right. JP as in JP as in Paul, JPL Invest, at JPL Invest. Well, my lands, James, thank you so much for joining me here on the show.
Thanks, Jay. High energy. I love it. It was great.
All right. God bless you. Thank you so much. There you have it. Another amazing episode of Raising Private Money with Jay Conner. And I really appreciate you that are tuning in. If you're listening on one of your favorite podcast platforms, Be sure to like and follow me so you don't miss out on upcoming episodes. And if you happen to be watching on YouTube, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and be sure to click that bell so you don't miss out on upcoming amazing episodes. I'm Jay Conner, the Private Money Authority, wishing you all the best. I look forward to seeing you right here on the next Raising Private Money.
Are you feeling inspired by the knowledge you gained in this episode? Then head over to jconner.com/moneyguide. That's jconner.com/moneyguide and download your free guide that shares 7 reasons why private money will skyrocket your real estate investing business right now. Again, that's jconner.com/moneyguide to get your free guide. We'll see you next time on Raising Private Money with Jay Conner.